This is the fourth installment of my series, Why Don't They Teach You This? Forgotten Muslim Voices from Europe and the Americas. And I want to take this chance to reflect a little bit after the first three episodes, the trailer, the episode on Mustafa al-Azimuri, Estebanico, the first African Muslim explorer of the southern parts of what we now call the United States, and François Makandal, the African, likely Muslim instigator, right, of what would become the Haitian Revolution, but that situates him in a transatlantic wave of revolutions in which African Muslims played a key role, right? And in the trailer, I promised you that we would be discussing people like Sayyida al-Hurra, the Moroccan governor of Tétouan in the early modern period, who also became Queen of Morocco and was fighting the Iberian Christian imperialist forces in the liminal zone between Africa and Europe, between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean, between what was becoming and what would eventually become the periphery and the core of the modern colonial world system. Many, many figures that we've discussed, that were discussed in that trailer and that will be discussed in this series. I present them as forgotten Muslim voices of Europe and the Americas. So the question is, am I not being a little bit overly dramatic, controversial? Do I sound like a conspiracy theorist, right? Why don't they teach you this? Well, let me be very clear about what I mean by this. Why don't they teach you this, right? And also forgotten Muslim voices from Europe and the Americas.
I'm Dr. Jason Idris Sparks, street scholar and poet, exploring visions of the good life and beauty in Islamic contexts with you.
Well, the first thing is my approach to this is as a humanities scholar and not a social scientist per se. I'm an Islamic humanities professor, and I believe that we need to educate people, learn, teach, share knowledge in a way which draws upon all of our learning tools. Sentiment is included in that. Emotion is included in that. Beautiful language, poetic language, lyrical language, strong language, soft language. The way you phrase things is important. So there's a pedagogical value to making strong sentences which will make somebody stop and think. Once we've done that, then the question is, well, wait a second. What do you mean they don't teach you this? Has somebody censored it? Has it been, purposely hidden? Is it not possible to find out about the Van Sally family in what is now called New York in the early colonial period? Is it not possible to find out that they were Muslims, Abraham and Anthony Van Sally, that they were half Dutch, half African? Is it not possible to find that out? No, it's possible to find that out. Is there anything preventing us from finding out the story of Estebanico? No, there's there's stuff out there. Stuff has been written, stuff has been produced. Great scholars, journalists, all sorts of people have written about these things, have produced content about these things. Sayyida al-Hurra, same thing. All the people I'm going to speak about, none of them have, none of their stories has been officially censored. That's not what I mean when I say, why don't they teach you this? There are people teaching us this and doing it in a very respectful, nuanced, historically complex way. So the real question then, when I say, why don't they teach you this, is why don't we learn this as part of our foundational knowledge? What makes something significant enough that it becomes the sort of general culture that you would have if you took world history or American history or Atlantic world history in high school? You see, the average person who's been to an English-speaking or French-speaking high school with an internationally based curriculum anywhere in the world, I'm going to venture here, will have studied the American Revolution and the French Revolution, and will have some idea about what happened in that period, and that it was, and they will know that it was a historically significant event. And they will probably recognize names associated with these revolutions. Robespierre, Washington, right? They'll recognize the name Abraham Lincoln, for example, when they think of the abolition of slavery. But when it comes to the Haitian Revolution, for example, or the Andean Revolution, or all of the slave revolts that happened in the Americas, or the Islamic revolutions of West Africa, which are happening in the same time period, the early modern time period until the 19th century, and in fact, which are often predecessors of what will happen in places like France or the United States. When it comes to those revolutions, those become specialized interests. They're not hidden in the sense that we're not allowed to learn about them. They're just not put forward as significant common knowledge. I've had comments in some of my videos in the comment section saying, you know, these people are not significant. Well, that's exactly the point I'm trying to make. They're not significant because of a certain idea of what is significant in history and what is significant enough to become common knowledge history. And so far, when people, for example, want to study world history, a lot of significance is attached to what has been done by, you know, excuse my saying it, but white men of European Christian ancestry. There is a disproportionate, if you wish, part of the curriculum, which will go from sort of classical Rome and Greece, which Westerners consider to be their origin story, and go straight forward to the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and the age of European and North American revolutions and reforms and political liberal ideas, also radical ideas, communism, fascism. It becomes a story of one part of the world. And people have said before, well, you know, history is written by the victor. So, you know, they're important because they won. Well, that already there you're signifying something. You're saying that it is more important to find out who won than who lost. Who came out on top is more important than all the people who were marginalized. Well, I suggest that if you are one of the many people who feel marginalized for any reason, you could be a white man, for example, who feel marginalized for economic reasons, right? For example. And this idea that the only people who count are the winners of history, in other words, the people who came out on top after battles, and that your story, your position is historically insignificant and unimportant, you're telling the vast majority of humanity that their stories are not significant. Not just Muslims, not just Africans. Nearly everybody becomes insignificant if that's our measure of what is historically significant. So when I say, why don't they teach you this? I mean, why don't they teach you this as significant? Why is it available but very rarely spoken of? Why is it not part of the core curriculum? Why is it not, right? Who says what's important? Who says what's significant? And on my channel, this is an Islamic humanities channel. It is a humanities channel from the perspective of Muslims, in particular, Muslims living west of Mecca. I am a Western Muslim. And so for me and my audience, these stories are significant and they are generally forgotten. And I'm trying to bring them alive and show that they were there, that they existed. And for those who come into contact with these stories and that the stories touch, they know that these stories are significant. If they're not significant to you, then, by the way, why comment in my comment section? That's a good question. Something about these stories is significant enough that you felt it was important to tell me they're insignificant. So there's something going on here. These stories have a significance, and my suggestion is that it is a valid effort for us, especially as Muslims. Muslims are the prime intended audience of my channel. Non-Muslims are welcome, but this is an Islamic humanities channel. Muslims living today in the world, at this particular point in history, I think can benefit from finding out the long-term historical presence of Muslim figures in Europe and the Americas. These stories are important. These stories count. They don't need to count for 3 billion human beings. If they count to you, then they count. Don't let anybody tell you they don't count. These stories are significant. They're significant to me. As a Western Muslim, they tell me, when people say, if you're not happy, why don't you go, somewhere else? I'm not from somewhere else. Right? And I have predecessors. Yeah, they weren't the strongest. They weren't the most powerful. Were your ancestors the strongest and the most powerful? 99% of you are going to say no. I don't care if you're white, man, woman, black, right? Muslim, Hindu. So who is to say that the significant stories of my predecessors, that is Muslims living west of Mecca, particularly who are connected to the histories of Europe and the Americas, who is to say that those stories are not significant? I'm here to say that they are significant. Maybe not to everybody, but they are to me, and I'm certain that they are significant to many people. And that is why my wager is to say we need to remember these voices. Many of us, most of us, have forgotten those voices. They're present in the archives. And my, I take my hat off to all the great scholars who are doing work on these stories. PBS, for example, in the United States, has done excellent work speaking about Muslim American history. I'll show you some links in the description of this video, right? From PBS, for example, speaking about the Van Sally family, for example. Speaking about Muslim history, for example, related to religious freedom and Thomas Jefferson, for example, the fact that he had a Quran, the fact that he thought that the United States should be a place where every religion is to be allowed, and people of every religion are to be allowed to have full rights of freedom of religion and of citizenship. Despite the fact that he was a slaveholder, he believed that free Americans could be Muslims, Hindu, right? He specifically said this, and this has been put in history books, in Islamic studies books, in cultural studies books, and on TV. But it has not entered the main discourse. The main discourse says Islam is foreign to Europe and the Americas. And this is where I say no. And this is where my series says no. You're forgetting some people. Now, if you think these people are insignificant, I tell you nobody's insignificant. And especially when somebody says, you don't belong here, you were not part of the founding story, I say, no, we do belong here. We were part of the founding story. We might not have come out on top at that time as the most powerful group in that story. We agree about that. But if anybody thinks that the only stories worth telling are the stories of the people who came out on top in the battles of history, then this channel's not for you. Move on. If you're enjoying my explorations of beauty and excellence in Islamic contexts, please feel free to share the love by liking, commenting, sharing your thoughts, subscribing, and of course, offering a prayer. If you think that marginalized voices are important, if you think that everybody has an extremely significant reason for existing because God Almighty, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, gave this person life and gave them a destiny and expressed his all-powerful, all-creative will through that person, through a unique experience in time and place. If you think this is true, then this channel is for you. If you think Allah creates insignificant beings, Godspeed. There's many channels for you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.